35 Russian diplomats are expelled from the US as part of new sanctions over claims the Kremlin tried to influence the presidential election. Although questions do remain whether American intelligence agencies can actually back up the allegations. Also to come this hour, a nationwide ceasefire brokered by Russia, Turkey and Iran brings a potentially pivotal halt to the conflict in Syria. But there's more evidence that terrorists turned to chemical warfare in the Syrian city of Aleppo as Sputnik's Arabic news agency films an alleged weapons factory used by militants. And the Pentagon says civilians may have been killed in the US-led coalition airstrike in the Iraqi city of Mosul as a campaign to rid Islamic State from the region resumes. Hello there, welcome. It's just gone midday here in Moscow. You're watching RT International. Now, the Obama administration has imposed a new set of measures against Russia over its alleged attempts to influence the US presidential election this year. 35 Russian diplomats have been ordered to leave the United States along with their families within 72 hours. An alleged harassment of US staff overseas was cited as a reason for the decision. It is one of the largest expulsions of diplomats from the US. Two Russian compounds supposedly used for intelligence purposes in New York and Maryland are also being shut down. Well, the sanctions also target Russia's two main intelligence agencies too. Four top military intelligence officials have been blacklisted by the US. They also single out three companies too that supposedly provided support for Russian cyber operations against the Democratic Party. The new sanctions were unveiled after the release of a joint report by the FBI and Homeland Security. RT's Caleb Moppin has more on that.
This report, it goes into detail, describes a lot of software and computer technology, but it never explains what proof that they have that all of this stuff is linked to Russia. There's no real proof or evidence that the tools they're describing or the technology they're describing is being used by people associated with Russia or the Russian government. Now, Obama is set to leave office very soon. He will be leaving the White House, and on January 20th, Donald Trump will be sworn in as the new president of the United States. People are speculating that it's not going to be a very smooth transition, as they clearly have very different assessments of why the U.S. presidential election ended up the way it did.
However, the joint report put together by the Department of National Security and the FBI does contain a disclaimer which says that the information in the document can't be confirmed and it's for informational purposes only. Commentators we spoke to do say that the report uses technical terms to hide the fact it has no evidence.
There are so many qualifiers in this report. There is even a disclaimer at the beginning of the report saying, you know, this may or may not be true. They certainly didn't go no further in establishing how these two hacking groups, if they were indeed responsible for the hacks, how they were tied to the Russian government whatsoever. They simply cited some private security companies that have made these claims. Well, I'm sorry, we spend $80 billion a year on U.S. intelligence capabilities. Certainly they can do better than this. We've all been through the just trust us on WMDs in Iraq, and frankly, most Americans, I don't think, are ready to believe just trust us again.
They're just covering their backs, aren't they? They know it's a bunch of rubbish. I mean, the fact that they're not actually standing by, they're not warranting the report they put out today, the Department of Homeland Security, rather points to the fact that it is pure propaganda, and they know it. There's a lot of information in there about, you know, the technological spec, that sort of thing. They're trying to blind people with science, but there's no real evidence.
Meanwhile, US President-elect Donald Trump has issued a statement on the sanctions and called on the United States to move on to bigger and better things. He said he will meet with intelligence chiefs next week. Meanwhile, Trump's senior advisor, Kellyanne Conway, has expressed her concerns over the new measures.
Even those who are sympathetic to President Obama on most issues are saying that part of the reason he did this today was to, quote, box in President-elect Trump. That would be very unfortunate if that were if politics were the motivating factor here.
And she might have a point too, because a senior Obama official did use fear-mongering language to explain that the incoming president can theoretically reverse the sanctions. However, it wouldn't make any sense to do so. We spoke to a number of experts who say that the statement is almost daring Donald Trump to U-turn on the measures.
It seems to me, if you look at this in the big picture of the failure of the Obama administration and its relationship with Moscow, its failure in Syria that we now see U.S. being sidelined, I think Obama is trying to salvage what's left of his tattered legacy by saying, I'm going to slam the door as loud as I can and make things as difficult as I can for the guy succeeding me. What's the political goal in his doing so? I think it is to try to undermine the incoming Trump presidency and to box him in, to make it harder for him to warm relations with Moscow, to try to create as much damage and leave as much of a mess on the welcome mat at the White House as he can for Mr. Trump.
It appears to be just the whole series of actions that have occurred. Earlier, the UN resolution, I think we're completely complicating the international scenario. We've had a horrible foreign policy to begin with, but I think we're further complicating it, which will cause even more challenges for President-elect Trump and his team to move forward.
Well, reports of alleged Russian hacking have been circulating in Western media outlets for months already.